So yeah, I was hoping for a bit more folks in the room, but it's late. I know it, and this is a talk about building a multi-tenant insurance platform, and I guess I should have left the insurance part out to make sure that there was a bit more people here. Don't worry, it's not going to be about insurance because I know it's late and I don't want to bore you. My name is Hylke. I'm a technical director at CoverWallet. That's now an Aon company. And I'm going to tell you the story about CoverWallet, a startup. It got acquired in 2020, and yeah, that led to major growth to our platform, in which we really had to go to a multi-tenant insurance platform. And I'm going to start today by explaining a bit our product to give you an idea of like, hey, what are we trying to solve for? So 7 years ago, CoverWallet launched as a startup to digitalize the insurance industry. So insurance today is already a bit more digitalized than 7 years ago, but back then it was mostly about going door to door and selling things, cold calls, you name it. So I'm going to summarize the product in a couple of slides. So you have here like the landing pages. The landing pages are like you see it on any other website. You get to a form in which you are explaining like, hey, what is it that you want? We find a quote for you. You select what you want. You check out. And that's about it, like any other product, right? So that seems at first hand very simple. However, the multi-tenancy comes in when you're deploying this into different markets for different partners in different everything. So first of all, like the landing pages, they change. So these are actually landing pages that we currently have, and there's a ton out there more. And if you take a deeper look at a product in terms of multi-tenancy, we have customizations for each different tenant. And what you're seeing here is the difference, for example, between the US and UK. I think it's a bit small. But what you can see here is like, hey, all these styles are different. And everything that's behind that is also customized. So for each and every country that we're in, there's a complete different product behind that, although the servicing models are the same. And yeah, who here is working at a startup or has worked at a startup? Okay, good. So you know what I'm talking about. It's focusing on survival, right? Like you're trying just to get to the next investment round. You're trying to create value so you get bought or you can get independent or you fail, right? And that's it. So for us, that was no different as CoverWallet. Like we really wanted to get to the next round of investment. We tried to survive. And yeah, that's why the focus of CoverWallet as a startup was really on business revenue. What are the opportunities that are able to bring us revenue, that can get us to the next investment round or get a higher evaluation of our startup? And next thing is like, to get there is like you really focus on delivery, like the speed of delivery. You really want to go fast. You really want to bring out this new functionality faster than any other competitor. And we even work together with contractors to get there faster. We just put like anything on speed. And then lastly, we have the intuition-driven innovation. So we really focused on our business leader. We had great innovators that really saw what was up in the market, and we played towards those directions. And InsurTech is still a very new space where lots of innovation is happening. And yeah, we really got a great product out. Now, all of these three things have great benefits. It was a very fun time, very exciting time, because you really want to get to the next round of investment. You really want to get like an awesome product. But it also has some disadvantages, right? Like if we are looking back, we got to a point where code got deprecated. Like we never focused on cleaning up. We really focused on like going to the next opportunity. And that limited us from scaling. And it was also affecting our maintainability. And from a technical perspective, we also had lots of manual work. Like, hey, we were not that big yet that we had to automate everything. So all the manual tasks, we didn't automate that. We just dealt with it. Fixing a manual task is much faster than just automating. And learning and innovation is also great. Like the intuition, they really got us forward. However, if you look at all the missed opportunities that we got because of that as well, because hey, some of them they just failed, and yeah, that's an opportunity cost that we really had to take. So let's move on to a real example of what happened. So we got this great business opportunity in Australia. And this was a great business opportunity, not only for the opportunity itself, but it took us global because we started out in the US and Australia, that's a whole different continent. So lots of potential, increase of value, etc. And as always, timelines were short. We always had to deliver as fast as possible. This was no different case. However, there were also a lot more requirements. Like I showed you in the beginning, like the UK and US, it's the same with Australia. Australia is completely different. So all those requirements, they were not yet available. So it was not like, hey, we could really change the product. So we, product and tech, were really aligned on, hey, we're not going to get there. We're not going to launch within those timelines unless we fork the code base. So that was actually our first way of doing multi-tenancy. You just clone your code base and you go out there. I won't recommend you that strategy. If you don't imagine yet why, I will show you later, but that was the first how we are getting there. So summarized, CoverWallet is a startup. We really focused on the delivery speed. How fast can we get new features to production? And also like, hey, how fast can we what can we do to survive? How can we get there? And we really adapted to the market. And that has some downside as well, like, hey, on scalability, like we had to go through the application to get there. And in terms of stability as well, like all of these functionalities that you keep on running, you get into stability issues because code stays behind. You're not automating tasks. Everything is manual. So, bring me to the next slide. CoverWallet and Aon Company. So Aon really wants to invest in digitizing the whole sector. Basically, the whole insurance industry needs to be digitalized, and given the growth that CoverWallet had seen, we went to Australia. I remember they acquired the company in 2020, and the idea was of this acquisition to bring this digitalization globally, because Aon is a huge insurance company. They operate all around the world, and yeah, as you can imagine, going from the startup to an enterprise, that brings its challenges. So if we are looking at all these challenges, like we can sum them up in a couple of points, right? Like we have the market, like, hey, as a startup, you really adapt to the market. Like we see what is what we need to do to get to a new opportunity, we go there. And as an Aon company, you already have all the opportunities, so we can make the market adapt to us. And in terms of growth, like we were before the acquisitions looking at 3 tenants per year. So we already had some kind of multi-tenancy. We didn't all go through the application. Luckily for us, we went through conditionals as well. But now we're looking at more than 40 tenants per quarter that we have to serve. Now, automation is the next thing. Like the manual work that we did, that's no longer possible, because if we're looking at a scale that we want to grow into and where we are today, we need to automate to keep on scaling. And in terms of processes, well, if you are working in an enterprise, you know all about the bureaucracy and the processes that are there. That's no difference for Aon. But as a startup, you work much more like creative. No, nothing is set in the process. You just make sure that things work based on whatever is popping up. And in terms of stability, as a startup, of course, you want to be stable, but those are balanced out with the speed of delivery. So you really want to have stability, but you're not always getting there, and you're fine with that. From an enterprise level, that's required. Like you have an enterprise contract, we need to ensure SLAs and the stability part. So I can sum up these requirements in like the challenge that we have and that we got from Aon. So we needed to become a multi-tenant insurance platform that solves for resiliency, stability, time to market, and all while being very flexible on business requirements. Because, hey, each market remains very different. So going to the multi-tenant insurance platform, we found some ways to solve for this. So first of all, the global reach. So I showed you already some of the examples of what is very different in each tenant, but it's much bigger than that. Like each region has legal requirements. Think about the Florida Privacy Protection Act. That's only available in Florida. Well, if you take it on a global level, there is every country, every state has a different regulation in place for everything. And next to that, we also have all these challenges that come from like, hey, we're not only offering insurance as CoverWallet or Aon, we're partnering up with companies like Uber, PayPal, 7-Eleven to offer their customers also insurance. So that means like logos are different. What is available is different. Like anything that you can think of can be customized. So we came up with a solution that we call internally application modes. Basically, those application modes, what they permit us is to write code in a separate tenant. So we are still fully flexible. And on the other end, we have the configuration side. So all the customizations, they either are in code or in configuration. We have our own internal configuration tool in which you can configure whatever is necessary. So the team structure. So with the multi-tenancy platform, it's not only like the technical challenge that you have or the functional requirements that you need to think of. Like the team structure is equally important. So when we started out, we had just some teams based on the customer journey and then some support teams. So the acquisitions team was basically in charge of the landing pages, the integrations with carrier, like a technical integration. Then we had checkout for a collection of money, and the customer is whatever happens after. We have like you can take endorsements or whatever in the customer area. Then the support team, they are supporting all these teams in terms of providing them with whatever they need. Infrastructure, we have Salesforce, data analytics, anything to support these teams. So the next step was to go to tribes because we started growing because we went from less than 50 engineers to almost 120 back in that time. And basically we converted all these teams into tribes. And all of these tribes, we split them up into two different types of teams. So we had like the platform teams. They were really taking care of the architecture, really deep diving into technical integrations, etc. And then the solutions teams that were starting to write all these customizations. And that worked well for a while. But we started to see also some problems with that. Teams, they were really getting distant from each other. They were not communicating. They were the information was no longer flowing through because, hey, they really became silos. So the next step was like, okay, now we are even growing to more. We're today 250 engineers at CoverWallet and still growing. So we moved to core teams and we split the entire solutions, so the customization, etc., completely out of there. So now it's no longer part of a tribe or anything. We have them completely separated and they work together. So you have like this horizontal layer about all the core teams, making sure that, hey, we deliver a new tenant in a very efficient way. And that also brings some problems, but the main point here is like, hey, we have them work together on like getting the experience out there for our customers. Stability. So this is a very interesting one. How to not break functionality in our tenants. So we have so many tenants today on our platform, and if you make a change in Australia, well, UK or in Europe, you don't want to make sure that you want to make sure that you don't break anything in another tenant, right? So and it started with creating the mindset. So before, because we were always focused so hard on like getting new functionality out there as quick as possible, we never ask ourselves like, hey, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And how can we make this very stable? And we got the stability as a startup as like, hey, we have a QA engineer that's responsible for the quality. And that's still how many companies work today. And also still we have QA engineers. However, we changed their role. So instead of having the QA engineer responsible for the quality, we made that a part of the team. So the whole team is responsible for the quality and it starts with the engineer. And they're responsible for every single code feature that they are producing, that they are testing it also in production. And and the other problem that we were seeing here was like, hey, we had a lot of new onboarders. You saw, like, in 7 years, we went from less than 50, basically from 0, to 250 that we are today. And that's a lot of new onboarders, a lot. And they all need to know what they are going to work on to make sure that they don't break anything in another tenant. So we started investing a lot in documentation, a lot. We wrote, I don't know how many pages over time to really make sure, like, hey, whenever someone is onboarding, you can, they are self-sufficient. They can find out what they're what the functionality is about. Then monitoring and alerting. So monitoring and alerting came in very early because of the stability issues. However, it was not part of the mindset. So we had some people that were responsible for the stability, or for a team, they were interested in the stability, but the engineers, they never looked at those metrics and alerts. So what we changed now is, like, hey, all the people are moving to create their own monitors. All the teams are creating their alerts, and they are actually understanding what's going wrong. Then the incident management process. We went really from a customer complaint to trying to find things ourselves, but it all comes together in the incident management process. I can give a complete separate talk about the incident management process because it's huge. It's every single aspect of it is super important, but I want to highlight on two things, like the postmortem and the responsibility. So the postmortems allowed us to really grow. Every time there is an incident in production, we do a postmortem session. There will be a postmortem document, and we want to make sure that that everything is written down and that there's always a follow-up action. And we do that based on prevention. We are doing that based on detection, whatever it's, how we can improve the fallout, etc. And the resiliency. So already with the postmortem, you get resiliency, right? Like every time there's an incident, you become better next time. You prevent that from happening. We're now taking the next step as well, like chaos engineering. So instead of just focusing on, like, hey, what happens when something goes wrong? You start thinking about, like, hey, if my payment provider is going down, I have a backup payment method available. And that we are doing on all the architecture. So another point that's super important when thinking about and growing into this multi-tenancy platform was the responsibility separation. Like, at first, like, the engineers were all touching the same code. And that's something that we really had to start spreading out to make sure that we don't have any issues. Because if I'm touching code of another engineer, I might not have the knowledge of doing it, right? So the documentation was the first thing. I already mentioned that before, like the documentation of the functionality, etc., helps in, like, hey, this is how you can implement new functionality. The second thing is, like, with the core and the experience teams, we have the core teams supporting the functionality that the experience teams are writing. So they have a bit of overhead in meetings. However, they don't have to write the functionality themselves for each different tenant. Then we have libraries. So our core teams, they are really focusing on isolating all the functionality into libraries. Having the functionality written in libraries allow experience team to move much faster into new regions and making the change that they need. If that's not possible, we are going to polymorphism. And this is the option that we are trying to prevent. So through inner sourcing, which is like open source within your own organization, they're able to make changes to the code base, but the code base is set up in a way in which there is, like, your default functionality, and they can extend that into whatever they need. We're trying to prevent this option because this requires, like, the connection between the two teams, right? So there needs to be a code review, there needs to be quality assistance around it, and we need to make sure that hey, once that ships, the responsibility stays in the core team and not in the experience team. Then APIs and event architecture. This is my preferred option. Like, everything that's an API, you just interact with. If it would be, well, any other payment provider or any other tool that you have, even Datadog is an API. So you extract all the functionality in an API, and you let the experience teams connect to it. And event architectures, they allow even further to to respond to specific events that are happening in your flows, right? For example, hey, there has been a payment, now I can isolate it to another team, sending an email to the customer. And well, I said that the APIs and the event architecture were my preferred option, but even configuration is even better. So if the core teams are getting configuration out there has to be no code written, because you can just change whatever you have. Change the logo, for example, through a configuration tool. And that's it. So this has been our journey so far. If you have some great ideas or you want to continue the conversation, feel free to ask me any questions now, or if you are thinking of something later, feel free to reach out through my email or my LinkedIn page.
Excellent. Round of applause for Hylke. Okay, coming your way, sir. I need to stretch my legs, it's fine.
So you guys, when you guys move into Aon purchased you guys, right? You mentioned, your developer base grow. And what about, have you, Aon migrate you guys, the IT team, into their big, giant enterprise IT team? Or are you still working silo?
So Aon is an insurance company, and you know that also in their IT structure, etc. So the way that they work is usually with consulting agencies. So they have an idea and they want it out, and they will just say like, hey, I want this tool with this functionality. And when they saw CoverWallet, that's a whole different type of organization, because CoverWallet, how it's structured, is really in a product-driven way. So you don't tell them what to do. You're giving them some problem to solve, and they will find out the way that the best way to do it. And they bought that part of CoverWallet, basically. Does that answer your question?
So you guys using Datadog for this multi-tenant insurance platform, right?
Exactly. So I should have mixed more Datadog into this. Should I repeat the question?
Yeah, you should have. No, I'm kidding.
Actually, they asked me to leave it more out. So
Yeah.
no. So yes, we're using Datadog to monitor the tenants. I could have added another slide into this, but I can explain you a bit how we're doing that. So when you have your dashboard set up, you can have at the top, you can configure like the tags, right? So with the tags, what you're doing is like you can select all the tenants and you can get the metrics for that specific tenant. So in case that something goes wrong in a specific tenant, in the large overview of your dashboard, you might not detect it, because it's like, hey, if you have 1 million requests and at some point you have 950,000 requests, you're like, hey, that's not an abnormality. Maybe someone is sleeping, but it might be the 50,000 requests that are failing in a specific tenant. So with a selection of these tags and setting up your monitors, you can actually detect an alert like for a specific tenant. And our experienced teams, they are really focused on those tenant metrics, while our core team, they are looking at the massive overview of the metrics.
So if it's a multi-tenant, right? Because ever your client, they ask for access to the Datadog solution to their own part of their insurance. Is it even insurance company hosting on your platform? Because the reason I was interested about this one, multi-tenant, right? And we have, by the way, we're also insurance broker. We're Marsh, right? Mm-hmm. And we're using something called Enron, right? And they host their platform, but they're hosting, the application for even the client, right? They're using Datadog. We try to access to, the hosting only for us, but they cannot do it because if we log in there, we can see all the other clients, information. So they will not give us access. So that's what I'm interested to see how you can separate even the tenant and only give.
I see. So the data that we are having available from the CoverWallet platform in Datadog is accessible to the entire CoverWallet organization. However, at Aon, we are using Datadog at scale. And we are on an enterprise tier in which you can have multiple companies within a specific organization. So, and the reason for that is like, hey, we're running the whole architecture in one specific site, but for example, we have everything in Google Cloud, while they are working with Azure, and even some other departments within Aon are working with AWS. So those, we don't see their metrics or what they're doing in their Datadog tenant because of how Datadog is playing that out for us. So Datadog has the multi-tenancy in like sub-organizations.
I got a question in the back here. I guess it's kind of the middle, not the back, but you know what I mean.
Hello. So I got a question about the first solution which you proposed about multi-tenancy through duplication. When you say duplication, does it make just a code-based duplication or database duplication and other? I mean, let's say for Australia, you may have come up with CoverWallet.au or some other domain. So is it duplication of every such resource or just the code base?
So it has been everything. So it's a complete separate entity that even has still today a team around it. And the product developed in a whole different way. And now our challenge is to get that back into the multi-tenant platform. And it's super hard. We started doing it. We have the checkout experience specifically already like back into the multi-tenant platform. But all the rest is still very much in the future. So it's completely separated.
Any other questions? Well, I've got one. So if you're not duplicating things for your multi-tenancy now, when you have a new opportunity, a new continent to go deploy on, have you gotten to the point now where it's basically just add a new configuration file, or how do you add a new tenant to the system?
That's a good question. So every time we launch a new tenant, it starts with a configuration tool where there's just a button, create new tenant. And based on the values that you put in there, we copy an existing tenant with all their functionality into a new one. And from there on, you start configuring, you can make customizations in code, etc. It's like a completely new tenant.
Cool. I have also worked at companies that did multi-tenant through duplication, and it's. I agree with you that it's not a good approach. The only thing that I think might be worse is if you did that and then made one of the tenants multi-cloud.
So one comment there. So I agree with you. Like from a technical point of view, the duplication is terrible and we're still suffering it. However, it got us to acquisition. And we survived as a startup because of it. So we are here today telling our story.
Yes, absolutely. I think every startup bends the best practices to survive in many cases. Anyone else have questions for Hylke? All right. Well, thank you for sticking with us to the end of the day. One more round of applause, and then please join us downstairs for some fun video games and drinks and snacks.